Okay, so this is going to be your study guide for the quadratics test, and remember that whenever we do a study guide, it's just like the test but with different numbers, so you can really study and figure out how to do these before you take the test. So, number 1, the equation 2x squared minus 5x equals negative 12 is rewritten in the form of blah blah blah. What is the value of q? So if you'll notice, this is exactly the vertex form that we talked about in class, except it just uses some different letters. So in class it looked like this, but it's the same thing. They're just using 2x minus p squared plus q. And notice that this equals 0, but in our function it equals negative 12. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move negative 12 over. So it's going to be 2x squared minus 5x, oh, sorry, that's not it, plus 12 equals 0. And if you remember, the purpose of vertex form is to tell us what our vertex is. So this is going to be the x coordinate of the vertex, and this is the y coordinate of the vertex, y of the vertex. And the question only asks for q, so really we just want to find what's the y coordinate of the vertex for this function. So graph that in Desmos, and then you'll get the vertex. So go ahead and try that, and pause the video in 1, 2, 3. Alright, and you should get that the y coordinate of the vertex is about 8.875. Alright, and that's how we do this. Alright, this one's hard. Talked about this one already. This one, you're going to think about putting it on an xy coordinate plane. And then remember, you need 3 coordinates whenever you're coming up with a quadratic function. So I'm just going to read it really quickly. This one is going to be 0, 162 because it says 162 feet in the air. This one is going to be 800 because they're 800 feet across, but it's still the same height. And then this one, it says halfway, and it says halfway it's 2 feet higher. So that's how I'm getting those 3 coordinate points. So I have 0, 162, I have 800, 162, and I have 400, 162. Alright, and then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use that data, and I'm going to come up with a quadratic model. So you can do it in Desmos, or you can do it in your TI-84. If you don't remember the process, go back and watch those videos. But I want you to pause the video and put these data points into a quadratic function. Okay, so this is approximately what you get. Alright, so it wants to know what's the approximate height of the cable 100 feet from either tower. So what you're doing is you're taking all the x values and you're replacing them with the number 100. So 100 goes here, 100 goes here, and you're going to type that into your calculator. And you should get 92. Alright. What are the solutions of the quadratic equation below? So remember, solutions are where it hits the x-axis. So you can solve by graphing, you can solve by factoring, you can solve by quadratic formula. You choose which one you want to do. I'm going to use the quadratic formula just because, well, I'm a nerd and I like it. But if it was able to be factored, you can factor it. I don't think this one can be factored. If you can graph it and find the solutions, you could do that. I'm pretty sure you can, but I'm going to do the quadratic formula really fast. So x is equal to negative b plus and minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, I apologize. Alright, so we got negative 12 plus or minus. Now I'm going to do the stuff inside the radical. Right, divided by 2. So this is not a perfect square, I'm pretty sure. Okay, just making sure I didn't lose my mind. So remember, we're going to make this into the biggest perfect square it is divisible by. So right now, see if you can simplify that radical. If you forgot how, go back and watch the video. So I got that you get 16 and 11. The square root of 16 is 4, so this becomes 4 square roots of 11. So now I'm going to rewrite it. Negative 12 plus or minus 4 square roots of 11 divided by 2. Remember, forget about the radical. Look at the 3 numbers. They're all 3 divisible by 2, so that's what I need to do next. So negative 6 plus or minus 2 square roots of 11. Those are my 2 solutions. So you could graph that and get the same answer, but there'll be some crazy decimals. It's up to you. Alright, Same thing with this one. What are the solutions to the equation? So remember that you always want to have a quadratic equal to 0. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 2 to the other side, and I'm going to get this. So just by looking at it, I can tell it's not going to be able to be factored. I don't know if it's going to be able to be graphed, so I'm just going to go ahead and use the quadratic formula just to save time. But once again, you can do about any formula that you want to as long as it works. So x is equal to negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Alright, and then I'm going to start simplifying. So a negative in front of a positive 5 is a negative 5 plus or minus the square root divided by negative 2. Now I'm going to do all the stuff inside the radical, and I get negative 7. So remember, anytime you have a negative inside a radical, an I comes out and then it's positive, I can't reduce the square root of 7 anymore, so that's why it stays. And then there's nothing else I can bring out. So remember that because the 5 and the 2 are both negative, also an appropriate answer would be this. So just realizing that both of these are the same thing is important. Okay. What are all the possible values of x in the equation? Still talking about the same thing. So for this one, I just know from doing it that factoring is going to be the easiest way, so that's what I'm going to do. So if I look at these two, their GCF is a 3x. When I plug out a 3x, I get 4x minus 5. I've factored it completely. I'm going to take the factors and set them equal to 0. So divide by 3. 0 divided by anything is 0. Add 5. 4x equals 5. Divide by 4. X equals 5/4. Okay. So when you do these a lot more, you can kind of recognize what's going to be easier to solve. You could also solve that by graphing, and you could have done the quadratic formula if you like that. Alright, so Post Malone and Ted Bundy, two things I'm obsessed with. I love Post Malone and I love serial killers. So they graphed these two functions. Got this one in blue, got this one in green. What statement describes the difference in the two graphs? So I want you to graph both of those in Desmos and pause the video and actually do it in 1, 2, 3. So that's a really awful picture, but you can see that the blue one is definitely lower on the y-axis and the green one is definitely further up. So Ted Bundy's graph is located further up than Post's graph. And that's how you do that. You just graph them and you compare the answers. Alright. This one's kind of hard. So congruent squares of side length x are cut from the corners of an 11 by 8.5. So you cut 4 congruent corners, and it forms an open top box. Which one model? Make sure you notice this, the surface area. So we're not talking about volume, we're talking about surface area. So surface area is like how much wrapping paper to take, that would take to wrap a box or something. So you started out with 8.5 by 11. So if I find the area of that, woo, I get that's 93.5, but then I cut away x by x, and x times x is x squared. X squared, x squared, x squared. So I had 93.5 feet, and then I took away 4x squared. So that's the difference. We did not do volume because the problem clearly states that you're talking about surface area. So the heights of two different projectiles, make sure you understand that's two different ones, are f of x and g of x. Notice g of x is not, sorry, this is really ugly. G of x does not have a quadratic model. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take that table, I'm going to put it in my calculator or in Desmos, and I'm going to find a quadratic model. If you don't know how to do that, go back and watch the video. So pause the video and try to find the model in 1, 2, 3. G of x is approximately negative 20x squared plus 41x plus 4. Okay, so now we have the two different projectiles, and I wanted to know what is the approximate difference in the maximum heights. Remember that when we talk about maximum, the y-coordinate is always your height. So what I want you to do is I want you to graph both of these, find the vertex, and then subtract the two heights. So try that in 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I try to put a box around them, but those are my two different projectiles. And now if I want to know the difference means subtract. I'm going to subtract those two, sorry, that's a 5. I'm going to subtract those two numbers, and whatever I get in my calculator is my answer. Alright, so 16.871875. Now you can round, of course, but close to that is what you should get. Okay, so this one, kind of hard. Remember that anytime you have 4 terms, 1, 2, 3, 4, you can just go ahead and group those. So I'm just going to write them down here so I have more room. And you just group the first 2 and the last 2 together, and then you pull out GCFs. So the GCF of that first one is M, and then you're left with 2M minus 1. The GCF of the second one is 6, and then I'm left with 2M minus 1. So the 2 parentheses should match, so that's your binomial GCF you're taking out. And then your 2 GCFs that you took out originally were M plus 6. So you're only going to look for one of these answer choices, and it's right there, C. Alright, this one is just about interpreting an equation. So here's your model, and you're talking about height, and you're talking about seconds. So we want to know, what is the constant? So that number 7, what does 7 represent? So does it represent gravity, time required for the ball to hit the ground, the height when first thrown, or the height after 7 seconds? So go ahead and graph this in Desmos or in a calculator and sketch a little graph, and do that in 1, 2, 3. So if you'll notice, what happens is it actually hits the y-axis at 7, well, at 0, 7. So that means the height it was first thrown, it was at 7 feet. It can't be A because it's the negative 16, that's the gravity constant. It can't be B because it definitely takes a lot less time than 7 seconds to hit the ground. And then the height after it was thrown, 7 seconds, you can look at your table, or you can plug in 7 for all the t's, and it's at negative 637. So A, B, and D don't make any sense. C is the only one that matches, so just look at the graph and check it out. Alright, this one, what is the value of h needed to complete the square for the equation blah blah blah? Don't get too caught up in this. This looks really similar to the vertex form, which is exactly what it's doing, and it's really just wanting you to find the h of the vertex form. Okay, so we're going to graph this equation, and we're going to find the vertex. So pause the video and try that in 1, 2, 3. So I got the vertex was at -2, -10. It only asks for the h value, so the h coordinate. But remember, I always change it to its opposite value when I plug it into the function. So I'm looking for the answer 2. If that makes sense. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm looking for -2. Okay. Alright, so here's another serial killer. John Wayne Gacy has a rectangular shaped vegetable garden that is 6 by 8 feet. He would like to increase the length and width by the same amount x, so increase means plus. So that the new garden is twice the current area. So it was 8 by 6, and 6 times 8 is 48. We want it to be twice the new area, so 48 times 2 is 96. So we need to find out what x has to be. So remember, when we're talking about area, we're talking about length times width. So length times width needs to equal 96. So it's just a quadratic. I'm just going to FOIL everything. I'm going to get my like terms together. And remember that I always want a quadratic to equal 0. Right now it equals 96, so I need to subtract 96 to the other side. So this is x squared plus 14x minus 48. So now you just need to solve this quadratic. I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing that because you can solve by graphing, you can solve by factoring, or you can solve by the quadratic formula. So I would suggest you pause the video and actually try to solve it in 1, 2, 3. So I just solved by graphing. It hits the x-axis at 3. 3 is my answer. Okay, so an astronaut on the moon throws a ball, blah, blah, blah. So here's one function, and that is that's on the moon. And then you have this on Earth. And it just wants to know how much longer will the ball stay in the air on the moon compared to the Earth. So if you think about something being thrown like this, right here where it hits the x-axis is where it hits the ground. So I want you to graph both of those and figure out where does it hit the ground on the moon, and then where does it hit the ground on the Earth. Pause the video and try that, and then we'll talk about what else we're going to do. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, so blue is the moon, yellow is the Earth. It wants to know how much longer it will be. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to subtract those two numbers. So you get about 10.4868-ish. You're going to round, obviously. Yeah, I think it's pretty easy. A penny is dropped off. I can't even say this building, but it's really beautiful and it's really big. It's the tallest building in the world at 2,716 feet. If the penny's pathway can be modeled by this equation, how long will it take to strike a 6-foot tall person? So we want the height of that equation to be 6 foot. Alright, and obviously this is a quadratic. We want all quadratics to equal 0, so I'm going to subtract that over. So now all you need to do is either solve this by graphing, by the quadratic formula. I wouldn't recommend factoring, but you can try it. I'm going to solve it by graphing, so pause the video and try to solve it some way in 1, 2, 3. So it would take about 13.01 seconds. So not a long time. And it would also kill them. Okay. This is a quadratic inequality. Here is the function. We want to see when it's fewer than 300. So 28. I'm going to change this to x's. I don't know why. That's just what I do. So less than 300. Okay, and now we're going to solve it. So you can go back and look at the quadratic inequalities video, but just look up how we would solve these. Okay, and then the answer is between negative 1.76 and 2.84, so notice that t is also between those two numbers. That's why the answer choice is B. Alright, so this one is talking about vertex form again. So I want you to go ahead and find the vertex of this function and pause the video and try it. Alright, so the vertex is at negative 2 and 0. That's your h and k. Remember, a is the number in front of x squared, so a is 1. And it just wants to know what is a plus h plus k. So 1 plus a negative 2 plus a 0 is a negative 1. Okay, what's the x-intercept of the graph? This is what we just did. So the x-intercept is where it hits the x-axis, and it hits at negative 2, 0. All you gotta do is graph it. Alright, so let me try to draw this picture. Okay, each side of a smaller square, a inches long, and the larger square is b inches longer. The area of the larger square is how many inches greater than the smaller square. Okay, so here is my large square. This is a plus b by a plus b. And here's my smaller square, a by a. Alright, and you know that when we're talking about area, we're talking about length times width. So I'm going to FOIL this. A times a is a squared. A times b is ab. B times a is ab. You just put it in alphabetical order. And b times b is b squared. I'm going to get my like terms together. I got a squared plus 2ab's plus b squared. Alright, so that's the area of the larger square. The area of the smaller square is a times a, which is a squared. So I want to know how much greater is it. So I'm going to have to write the larger square minus the smaller square. So the a squares cancel out, and the only thing left is this in the middle. I know those are kind of hard. Alright, select all statements that are true about the expression. So there will be a question on the test where you have to pick multiple answers. Okay, so this is not A, B, C, D. This is how many of them are accurate. So go ahead and graph this and sketch a little graph and pause the video and do it in 1, 2, 3. Okay, so the first one says the maximum value of the expression is 4. If you look at the max, it definitely is 4. So it's actually 2, 4, but I would say that that one's true. The expression is equivalent to this. This is talking about the vertex. So notice the vertex would be at 2, 4 for this, and it is, so that one's true. It says it can be written as negative x squared plus 4x. So let's look at that for a minute. Okay, so this is like a negative 1, and we would distribute. So a negative 1 times an x squared is a negative x squared. A negative 1 times a 4x is a negative 4x. That's definitely not the same thing, so no, C is not true. And D says the order pair 2, 4 is the highest point on the graph of the related function. Yes, that's true. So my answers are A, B, and D. Okay, and then sometimes they're just going to ask you questions about graphing, so you just have to know how to graph that and then sketch it. I'm not going to go over that because it's super easy. Alright, so let me know if you have questions, and then that should help you get ready for the test, and you can always go back and watch this and pause the video as much as you need to. Okay, bye, good luck on your test.